Nice Radio Callaloo presents Just Another Look. Just Another Look is an innovative, exciting, albeit decidedly provocative and yes, certainly controversial, socio-political analysis of issues of a local, regional, and international nature. Just Another Look is heard on Nice Radio on Saturdays at 6 p.m. with repeat broadcasts on Sundays at 9 p.m. You can catch us on the World Wide Web, www.niceradio.info. You can always check us out on Facebook and YouTube. I am, of course, Keith Joseph. Today, dear friends, is Saturday. It is the 8th day of March 2025. Welcome to another edition of your favorite program, Just Another Look. Today, the international community observes International Women's Day. And it is part of a celebration of the tremendous struggle that women have had throughout history to be duly recognized, to be seen as part of humanity, not as floor mats, to be seen as possessive of integrity, intelligence, and with a profound capacity to work. In hindsight, it would appear that difficult to believe that at one point, in spite of women showing a capacity to work, to labor, to be part of the productive capacity of a society, in spite of that, they were treated almost inhumanely, and indeed in some societies inhumanely. It took the international community many years to recognize women and to recognize them for who they are, not as some attachment to menfolk, or not as members of a society who could only be utilized in the bedroom and in the kitchen. For many years, it was considered anathema for women to be seen and heard as members of the society in their own right. History records that many women who had the gift of writing had to produce their work under men's names in order to get it published. It was as if the society had been so male chauvinistic and male dominated that the men were saying to women, know your place. And that place was to be decidedly subservient to the men around them. And that approach dominated societies around the world. And the liberation movement, the women's liberation movement, was a long and at times painful struggle for women to gain recognition as individual members of society in their own right. And so they developed institutions. They worked hard through the years to not just gain recognition, but to demand it. To be able to take their rightful place in society, in jobs, at workplaces, in almost every field of endeavor. They had to overcome the feeling of inferiority instilled in them through the socialization process, beginning in the home, continuing at the school, and at the workplaces. But they have emerged. They have earned the respect of their menfolk, for the most part. And they continue to grow in stature all around the world. And where societies are still seemingly recalcitrant or hiding behind certain beliefs and practices, women are still seeking to emerge from under the feet of men. It is unfortunate that in some societies that boast of having advanced in terms of development, where they talk about the institutions that they have created and how much they have facilitated women's involvement, that in those very societies, the men continue to ill-treat the women, to use and abuse them. One has only to spend a few minutes in the family court in St. Vincent and the Grenadines to have an understanding of the level of abuse to which women and girls are still being subjected. They're still considered the playthings for men and boys. That is part and parcel of the socialization of the average Vincentian male. A feeling that being male makes him inevitably superior to his female counterpart in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And while we talk about having advanced so significantly, the fact that in our system, girls and women outnumber boys and men at every level of the education system except at the primary school level. At the primary school level, boys outnumber girls. But at every level of the education system, from primary through to tertiary, girls outnumber boys. Women outperform boys, sorry. They outperform boys at every level. But performance in education has not been seen as facilitating consideration of them being equal to their male counterparts. And you recognize in our institutions, in our workplaces, that women are still by and large considered tokens. when appointed to top positions. It's still a lot of tokenism. And you see a lot of tokenism in politics. In St. Vincent and the Grenadines. We don't like to talk about it. We believe that politics is a man's thing. And for many years it was felt that if a woman dared to venture into politics, something was wrong with her. That she was considered strange if she sought political leadership. And political parties behave just like the rest of the society, in making women tokens in their organizations. We ensured that within political parties, for example, they did not reach beyond a certain level. They were workhorses for the party. They were organizers for the party. They were fundraisers for the party. They were house-to-house advocates for the party, but not considered appropriate to become leaders of the party. That is a hangover of our colonial experience. And the fact that in Vincentian society today, we have political parties and other organizations finally saying, oh, we have more women than hitherto. They're not in a position to say we have as many women as we have men. So it is still in large measure tokenistic. And our men are not ashamed to continue to treat women in a demeaning manner. Because there is still that feeling, that sense of entitlement, that sense of right, that they're superior to women. And that women's ideas are of lesser importance than their menfolk. And we dare to challenge women when they seek to be as aggressive as their male counterparts in pursuing leadership, in seeking to better themselves. And we look at our society today, and we recognize, if we are honest with ourselves, that many of our menfolk cannot cope with women. Because they dare not accept among their peers that their female counterparts have been achieving, have been successful in different fields of endeavor, and that they can command higher salaries in some instances, jobs in which they have authority, they cannot come to terms with the fact that girls and women are outperforming them in education and other fields of endeavor. It is the reason that we find in our society males dominating the juvenile delinquency institutions. Males dominating the prisons. Males also dominating the madhouses. And we have continuing high levels of violence against women. Unable to cope with the increasing development of women, our men turn to violence as a means of equalizing things in their eyes. While you hear the political parties and others boasting about the engagement of women, it is because they themselves have not yet reached a stage where they consider women sufficiently educated, capable of being political leaders. Too many of our menfolk are saying to women, that is not for you, it is a nasty game. And so when a woman puts her hand up to become a politician, she is often vilified by her own kind first and foremost. That's interesting. By her own kind. Women are the first to vilify her. Sad, isn't it? Her own kind are the first to vilify her. What are you doing in that? That is not for you. But it's the same vilification they get when they aspire to educate themselves, when they aspire to improve themselves in their workplaces. Same vilification they get. And that's why in society we often say women are their own worst enemies. Because colonialism has left us a legacy that allows us to behave as though women have no place in society except in the home. And much of that in the kitchen and the bedroom. Shameful. Shameful. There are political parties when they have women coming forward talk about it as an achievement because it is still so rare. Such an approach remains pathetic, disgusting. But as we celebrate International Women's Day, we ask ourselves, in Vincentian society and indeed in the Caribbean, are women any better off? Really, are they better off? When they go public and take issues of national importance on board, they are often chided more for being a woman than for the substance of the causes that they espouse. Our menfolk continue to socialize their male children into believing that women are supposed to be under their feet. Unfortunately, in Vincentian society and much of the Caribbean, too many of our girls and women are prepared to accept that approach. And that is why we could have had the nonsense of an articulation as one of the causes of crime that high valued women make such heavy demands of their menfolk to allow them to maintain the kind of lifestyle that they want, that the men turn to crime to satisfy that need. Absolute rubbish. That it should come from a political leader in the Caribbean makes it all the more reprehensible. Because it continues along the line perpetrated by centuries of colonialism, centuries of male chauvinism, that women causing the men to commit crime. They're not intelligent enough to lead your organization, but they're intelligent enough to con men into committing crime to facilitate their lifestyles. And we take this foolishness in the presence of other heads of government, themselves mostly male, who sit there and accept it as if it is fiat. Women in the Caribbean, including St. Vincent and the Grenadines, have a very, very difficult hill still to climb. Because many of our menfolk are not prepared to accept them as their equal. They would like to have them under their feet forever. They would like to speak to them as they want, treat them as they want. And they must be happy because you put a few dollars in their pockets or in their hands. That's still the attitude of the majority of men in St. Vincent and the Grenadines and in much of the Caribbean. Women are their playthings as far as they are concerned. And the hero is still he who can get any woman he wants, even if that woman is married and living in house with her family. Our politicians have not proven themselves to be paragons of virtue in this regard. Indeed, it is almost a fetish among politicians to play the field of women and to boast about it and to have their women boast about that reality. 2025, that is still a Vincentian reality. Because men dominate our society and continue on a daily basis to convince themselves that that is their God-given right. That women are not really their equal. And how painful it is to sit or work in positions where women are in charge. That is a problem. That is our problem. So 2025 International Women's Day should be an opportunity for Vincentian women to reflect. Reflect on themselves. Where are you today? What have you achieved as a woman in your life? What are you doing as a woman to impact your husband, your boyfriend, or whatever, male counterpart, and your boy children about the respect that they need to have for girls and women. How are you articulating that in 2025 and beyond? What is your level of commitment to advancing the cause of women and girls in Vincentian society from today onward? What is your level of commitment to womanhood, to motherhood? Because you are as responsible as your male counterparts to facilitate a change in attitudes towards girls and women in Vincentian society going forward. Let this International Women's Day be a point of departure for you to commit yourself to supporting and promoting and advocating for the cause of women, for respect, for recognition, for equity, and ultimately equality with their menfolk in Vincentian society and elsewhere. Let this be a starting point, a new beginning in your support for the cause that women have been espoused over the years, over the centuries of fighting for women's liberation. Recognizing that it goes beyond thinking like men or wanting to be like men, but to show instead that women have the capacity to be as good as anybody else in society in any position whatsoever. Make the difference from today onward. Make that commitment. And our girls and women need not be traipsing and running around after politicians to see what they can get from them. Allowing them to continue to believe that they have some particular type of power that they wield that you want to be part of. Enough of that. Make the change today. Facilitate your own social transformation and become a more committed individual woman for the future of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Do not allow our society to blow hot and blow cold. Do not allow yourself to become political patsies, held aloft as trinkets. Never allow political parties to use you or abuse you, as so often happens in the home. Let this be a new beginning. So we wish women across the world, and particularly in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, a happy International Women's Day. But one on which we call on you to reflect and to facilitate your own development, and that you become exemplars for girls in our society that will become women and women leaders in nearly every field of endeavor alongside their male counterparts in a society based more and more on merit and less on gender. Enough said. We continue in Vincentian society to hear of things and learn of things after the fact. When the government deems it pertinent, they come ahead with things because elections coming. And so they want to show you and tell you how many good things they have been doing and how many good things they plan to do, whether you like it or not. Because they assume that you like it enough to give them the vote. But what are the critical issues? And there are people who are anxious to tell you how you must respond to certain issues. What really are we seeing as responses to issues? It was good to hear Marcus de Freitas detail the horrors that he has been through for the last several years. Trying to do the right thing. And being browbeated hither, thither, and yon by a government that purports to care for the Vincentian people, but does not care enough to pay him his due in a timely manner. So how is the Vincentian electorate to accept that a court can make an award for an individual's land, but that the government can do whatever it wants with that land and not pay the individual who no longer has access to his land? The norm should be that unless you pay for it, you ought not to have access to it. But this is St. Vincent and the Grenadines. So Marcus is made to wait until it pleases the government of St. Vincent and the Grenadines to pay him what the court has ordered them to pay him. This is the same government that will stand before you on one political platform after another and in Parliament to talk about how much it cares and loves Vincentians. And so you're left to wonder, where is the truth? Why has the government chosen to treat Marcus de Freitas the way that he has been? There were concerns about the government's assessment of the value of some people's land when they wanted to construct the Argyle International Airport. There were rumblings left, right, and center about how the land was acquired. And then we had the issue of the acquisition of the land of the farmers to facilitate selling land to Sandals. Not leasing it, selling it to Sandals, so it becomes their property. And now we have people in North Leeward whose lands have been acquired, or in the case of others, lands that they were working, albeit it may have been government land, but they were earning a livelihood from it. There are issues in relation to that. And the response that we often get is that government, in its own wisdom, has determined that the land is more valuable to them for the purposes for which they intend to use it. And that we should have an understanding that it is in all of our collective best interest for them to do so. And one of the problems that you have in politics is that in Caribbean politics, part and parcel, integral to Caribbean politics and political culture, is the system of patronage. That's why we have what they call constituency clinics and people lining up outside, the beggar-maid approach that we have since the days of colonialism. That's what the planters used to do. Give little perks to those who will bring news on others, so he could nip any aggressive opposition in the bud. Bribe people to bring news about others. And the planter feel honored because he has them in his hands. Politicians do that all the time, particularly when you're in government. You share political largesse. That's why each time we have the Life to Live materials coming in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, steel, lumber, galvanized, and cement, people raise concerns about where they see some of those things going and how often they have seen some gone to the same place. So you wonder if it is some kind of business they have there, or are they genuinely in need of the same materials each time a shipment comes. Our politicians today continue along that same trend. They like to have people at their beck and call. Those are the minions that will do anything for them, even if it means staying in poverty, staying indigent, because every now and again they give you something and they keep you on the lifeline. That is the system of patronage. You go to the constituency office to see what you can get to help you live. You go to the constituency clinics, and that's why they can come and tell you on the media, the other day I had to deal with such and such, you know. Somebody came to me and they told me such and such, and I did such and such. You're not empowering anybody. Worse, you're keeping them impoverished. And you're keeping them in a system of patronage from which they can never extricate themselves. The concept of is we time now. It is we time to be able to go to the parliamentarian and get what you want. And you get more of what you want as the election comes closer. The same people who in 2000, April, May 2000, were on the streets complaining about the state of the roads, complaining about the high cost of parts for their vehicles that were damaged by said roads, don't seem to have a problem with the roads now. And they're significantly worse in some areas than they were in 2000. The same people in 2000 were regurgitating the comments by the political leaders in the opposition at the time about the state of the economy. About the political handouts, about the levels of unemployment and underemployment. Those same people are still around. But because they have access to political and economic largesse, a la the ruling regime, it's all right. It's all right. And so we end up with a political culture further entrenched that leaves the majority of our people as beggars. But don't worry, because on the world stage, they are the beggars. They are the beggars. But they couch it in nice terms, talking about friendly governments. And talk about the record of accomplishments. That after all these years, we really deserve to be called St. Vincent and the Grenadines of Taiwan. Think about it. In any 1 week, not month, in any 1 week, how many times in the local news would you have heard that we get something else from Taiwan? That we thanking Taiwan for something else? In 1 week. Sit and listen to the news in 1 week. And count the number of occasions in 1 week that Taiwan is mentioned as giving the St. Vincent and the Grenadines government something. And we ought to be decidedly bothered that a head of government could turn around and say to a nation, because it's the nation that end up listening to it anyhow, that if the electorate chooses another party to run the country, it will take them so long to repay the debt that they have created for Taiwan. And it would be like a millstone around the neck, man. If you change the government, that they wouldn't be able to pay back that money for a long, 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 long time. So the essence of what they were saying was keep us in power so we could continue borrowing from Taiwan, continuing to increase our indebtedness to Taiwan. That makes sense? that makes sense? Would you not try to diversify your loan portfolio? So while you told us that not so long ago about this country's indebtedness to Taiwan under your leadership, under your governance, and how it will be a burden on any party that takes over government and decides not to stay with Taiwan. But in the meantime, you continuing to increase our indebtedness to that same Taiwan. So you weren't satisfied with the World Bank's offer of financial transaction for the new hospital. You wanted more money. And so you went where you could get it, obviously, to Taiwan. Increase our indebtedness. And then we bypass the tenders board to give a Taiwanese company the job. And turn around and tell them the intention they will employ plenty people to work on the hospital. So as far as they're concerned, that makes good sense. That makes good sense. Keep borrowing from Taiwan and keep telling the nation, stay with us at the election time because we can continue to get money borrowed from Taiwan. Don't bother with anybody else who come to you as a political party and suggesting that they may turn to some other country. Because Taiwan will then call in the chips. But they don't tell us the whole story because China claims Taiwan. That's why Taiwan is not a member of the United Nations. Because of China's claim on Taiwan. So don't give people half-baked news. Give them the whole story, the full story. But then we don't like to give the full story. So there's a lot of ad hocracy. And people get the news before they get the official news. So the same thing with the port. And the challenge that they recently had. One wonders if the government would have made an official statement had it not been for people calling in on radio programs and telling the nation what they are seeing happening at the port. Would we ever have had that story? That's the nature of St. Vincent and the Grenadines today and the politics that is practiced. Last week we spent time addressing the issue with Dr. Renel Murray. And so we're getting this Gerald Thompson type explanation. Dr. Murray has spoken once. He doesn't have to go back anywhere to talk to anybody. Just don't use his information as a means of justifying what you are doing. That's essentially what he's telling everybody. Don't use me. I am not your prop. I am not your escape route in terms of explaining what you are doing in the quarry. It's my study and I know what it can be used for. Don't use it without talking to me. Because what you're using it for is not what it was intended for. Plain and simple. But you're sending your nondescript politicians to offer an explanation, knowing that they lack the capacity so to do. That is the problem. There are some things that the boss explains, the mighty explainer. There are other things that he leaves to others. Because when he's ready, we end up with a story as we have seen and read in Eyewitness News on the 28th of February that reads, quote, Prime Minister Ralph Gonsalves has made yet another unsubstantiated claim that some local media are agents of foreign entities. One assumes that when the Prime Minister speaks, that it is to make things and claims and statements that are substantiated. But sometimes you get a kind of cloak and dagger type approach based presumably on the fact that he's head of national security. So he claimed, and Eyewitness News quotes, and nowadays you see a number of things being written on some online publications. You see an increase in them. And you hear at least one radio station, possibly two. I could tell you they have online publications in relation to St. Vincent and the Grenadines and radio stations. I could tell you here today that they are being paid by persons who operate out of an embassy in Barbados and one in Dominica, an embassy of a foreign country. That's a quotation from the Prime Minister. It's a kind of cloak and dagger thing. You have information, but he's not giving you all the information. He's giving you some information that presumably he alone has. So what is he telling you if he's not going to call the organization's name or the individual's name? What is he doing? He's pampering to his minions. I would say, we have some information here. So you hear at least one radio station and possibly two. Call the name. I could tell you here today that they are being paid by persons who operate out of an embassy in Barbados and one in Dominica, an embassy of a foreign country. There's only foreign countries that set up embassies. I could tell you that today, but in fact, he didn't tell you. I could tell you they are being paid by persons who operate out of that and that and that, but he didn't really tell you. Right? So is he baiting somebody? Is he baiting a set of people? And then he goes further. It's a country from the Asian continent. It is not the United States. It is not Britain. It is not Canada. It is not a European country. A European Union country. It is not a Latin American country, nor a country in the Middle East. It's a country from the Asian continent. And people who are going line up to sell the passports are also financing them, financing the opposition forces in the country. You understand that? Cloak and dagger business. He has not been able, as Minister of National Security, to get a grip on crime in his country. The intelligence system doesn't seem to be working so well in that regard. Under his watch, we have record national murders per year. The intelligence doesn't seem to be working so well in that regard. But he could tell us, yet not really tell us. You want to name a country, but you're not really wanting to name a country. You're trying to tell people, go on Google Map, but don't look for the country in the US or Britain or Canada or any European Union member. Don't look in the Middle East. Don't look in South America. Go on Google Map and look for the country on the Asian continent. Yeah? And people lining up to sell passports. Remember we had a passport incident at one of our embassies in the States? How did that play out? How did that play out? Suddenly, everything just died down. When they had the issues with passport in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, nobody could explain how AIM get a passport. So you make issues when it pleases you to make issues, to turn it up. Yeah? Say what you want to say. Because when other people say what they want to say, they're likely to get sued. So is it that you don't want to get sued? Is it that? Don't play hide and seek. Come out and say what it is. And let the nation understand and make meaningful decisions based on the accuracy of what you are saying. But don't play the cloak and dagger business, because that doesn't bode well for you, because each time we get high murder rates, we get an explanation from you that suggests that you met with the bigwigs in the country and that things will happen. Intelligence so good now that things will happen. And you'll see it when you see it, because I can't tell you, it's intelligence. But not so long ago, you also told the nation, if you're not in a gang or anything like that, you don't have to worry. Because it looks as though they're targeting certain people who are paid to be in gangs. Yet, later on, we have no evidence of gangs. Or one of your own people in the hierarchy of the police have to come out and make a clear statement about gangs being operating in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. But you, the head honcho for national security, seem ambivalent, seem not to be sure as to whether or not we have gangs in the country. But you seem to be clearer on this business of somebody or bodies in the country being paid to write things, and they're being paid to do this and to do that. But you tell people about making innuendos. Is this not one? It's a country from the Asian continent, and people who go in line up to sell passports are also financing them, financing the opposition forces in the country. Is that not an innuendo? So sometimes when you hear a man doing a commentary on radio, you think the radio paying he paying the radio station. And you know where he getting the money from? From overseas. Well, yeah, right. Yeah? So you hear where we're going. But remember, people were once so certain, once they got into office, that you needed to go after Annie Mustis and James Mitchell and them for the Otley Hall Marina and Shipyard. The country is yet to receive a clear indication of what that inquiry cost us. It stopped once James Mitchell went to court to clear his name. You have heard nothing about those who maligned him or those who made the claim. The inquiry just shut down. Shut down. But why didn't you continue it? Why didn't you continue it? If they all were so confident that there was something there that needed to be investigated, how much money did we spend on that investigation? Who were the beneficiaries of the monies paid for that inquiry for as long as it existed? Why was it stopped? Why was it stopped? A former prime minister had to go through hell to clear his name. From statements made by the leadership of that inquiry, we're not hearing anything about that. Because at the end of the day, it was a waste of Vincentian's scarce resources. We're not hearing anything about that. Why? Is it only when something appears to work in favor of the government that we keep beating it like a drum, so that the minions can jump to it? Why aren't we talking about things that did not go so well? Immediately after victory in 2001, you paraded that work was starting at the extremities of the cross-country road. And yet when it started, people asked, was there an environmental impact analysis? And the response that came was that none was requested by those who were funding the project. So who was funding the cross-country road that we began immediately after elections in 2001? We were so anxious to convince everybody that the country could have done such great wonders with a cross-country road that you announced we were starting from the two extremities, one on the leeward side, one on the windward side. Whatever happened to that project? How much money we had actually spent in the work for the cross-country road? When the man fell along the precipice and had to be pulled up by a rope, and then not long after that, he made sure he left the country because he wasn't going to be part of that anymore. That didn't make the news. Nobody wants to talk about cross-country road anymore. Nobody. When we had the bridge over troubled water, and we learned that it bypassed the tenders board, you were probably right in thinking they'll only make noise about it for a few days. And so, it was not until the recent bypassing of the same tenders board, different people in charge now, of course, for the award of the contract for building the new hospital in Annesville. Only then people remember and reconnect with the bridge over troubled water and said, but wait, one would have thought that they would have learned their lesson back then. But this is an election year, so it doesn't seem really to matter, because you're hoping that you win the government again and nobody comes and asks, well, why did you bypass the tenders board with regard to this issue? So when things don't go well, they're buried. Like the opening of the airport. We opened the airport and some journalists and people at the opening were asking, what is that big star doing embedded in concrete at the opening? And you know what? Nobody claimed responsibility. So you build a big star that featured prominently in the opening of the Argyle International Airport. And then when people, journalists included, asking what was that supposed to symbolize, that it was a party project? What was it supposed to symbolize? Nobody claimed knowledge of it, but it was destroyed subsequently. Nobody claimed knowledge. A star is put down at the airport. It is part of the airport for all intents and purposes at the opening ceremony to send a signal. And yet when questions were raised, nobody could answer as to how it got there. So it suddenly appeared. But it was in concrete. So it must have been under construction. But we could explain away everything, you know. So nobody knows anyhow. But I order for it to be destroyed. Make sure they destroy it. But it featured at the time that mattered most. History will reveal that at the opening of the Argyle International Airport, there was this star embedded in concrete. You could move it afterward, but it was part and parcel of the historic opening of our first major international airport. Yeah? So we do that and we leave it. We do that and we leave it. So the ruling party could have abrogated unto itself the right to hold rallies there for election purposes. Promote the airport, have a rally there. It wasn't offered to anybody else. Could the opposition have gotten permission to have a rally on the airport under construction? Let's get real. You can't just drop certain things and leave it there to fester, to sow doubt in people's minds, and then be credited for being an astute politician and a wise one and a this and a that and the other. It is utter nonsense to so treat an electorate. But that could only happen because of the political patronage system that exists. So we can create little institutions, put a little bit of money in people's hands, and not be concerned about whether or not it is substantive, whether or not it makes any sense. And so we put our students in the same mode by saying to them, if you get a full range of subjects, we'll give you $500. That is nonsense. It might be better to have determined the needs of the students. And I'm sure those whose parents could have afforded it would have been happy if monies were given to those most in need. But you sweep the whole brush because it serves as a form of largesse and continues that system of dependency. As successive generations of leaders in the country continue a process that existed since they came the first time and ravaged the country. Slavery, indentureship, same khaki pants, the same process of patronage. So you create a generation, successive generations of beggars, because you yourself at the head of governance engages in the same sort of practice, beggar-made policies. It's all we know. That's all we know. And so you walk around with your hand out with a large begging bowl. And anybody who's willing to throw anything inside there, that's it. What it is we are afraid of? What is we were afraid to establish? Why it is we were afraid to establish the consultative democracy that you talk about? Where is that book that was traipsing around the country and passages read, etc., on the contract with civil society? What has civil society benefited from that contract? And who signed the contract? No signing of the contract. Was a document prepared by certain individuals within the party and sold, marketed to their minions. This is what we need. This is our contract with civil society. What part of that contract has ever been implemented and identified as such? What was it? It was a political ruse. And you see the kinds of political shenanigans. And that's why we referred to the document, the quasi-illegal document that claimed that Boye would have lost the case, or Boye didn't have a good chance of winning the case against ECGC. Boye ended up winning. So much for your legal, whoever wrote it, for their legal advice. But it was put out at a time when some in the organization feared that Boye's popularity and charisma may have carried the day instead of others. That's what it was about. And that's the game that is being played. So once the media praising you, and they could see and you could count how many times your pictures are in the media, how many times your name is mentioned on how many broadcasts, because that is evidence of popularity, then that is fine. That is fine. When it is not, there's a problem. When people become critical, the media gets slammed, or the individual. And that's why people ask, in the past week people were talking about persons with disability and their march and so on and so on. This is 20-something years, and the people from the society, people with persons with disability, are still at a point where they are asking and begging the government, what happened to making our society wheelchair compliant? How many of the government institutions that have been built since 2001 are compliant? How many? How many? It has taken donkey years for the government to now provide buses provided by the Japanese government. School buses that are wheelchair compliant. Only now. Only now. It's an election year. So only now you see these school buses with the extra room in the back that are wheelchair compliant. But many of the institutions that the people are coming out of those buses to go to are not wheelchair compliant. How many schools in the country are wheelchair compliant? Or are you suggesting that whoever needs a wheelchair and is at a student age, should go to a school where it is compliant because they have a disability? Is that what we're saying? We're not in the business of inclusivity. We're not in the business of including them in regular classrooms, in regular schools. Is that what we're doing? Is that what we're doing 20-something years after taking office? And we were concerned here, just another look, of the proximity of the announcement of people being of the lowest common denominator and such other derogatory terms to the reopening after the refurbishing of the Peace Memorial Hall. Remember, early in their first term, the Unity Labour Party did an extensive refurbishing of the Peace Memorial Hall. But they also remember that when they were officially opening it, persons with disability were outside protesting because they couldn't understand how a government that promised so much in their manifestos of 2001 could have in their first major project ignored them and their needs at a center as important as the Peace Memorial Hall. Remember that? But if you remember that, you should also remember what was the reaction of those who were in charge. You see, there are some people who are anxious to criticize others but who cannot take criticism themselves. All you have to do is to listen to one parliamentary session and you have your belly full of that. Because some people want to be always right. And they always have to respond once something is said. They can't let anything pass because of how it might be interpreted. So they have to put their spin on it. That's why Parliament is so difficult to listen to. It becomes a moribund talk shop where egos clash. But like elephants clashing, the grass suffer. We, the people, are the ones that pay the price. The Vincentian electorate are like pawns. They are the recipients of the largesse of those who control the levers of power. In order for them to remain nicely dependent, for want of a better way of putting it, nicely dependent on largesse. Come and see me. Yes, I can fix that for you. But there's an uncanny relationship between the state of the roads in the country, for example, and the leadership or the parliamentary representative of that area. The results of successive elections for the ruling regime in the Grenadines, North and South, has seen them lose over and over and over again. But if you look at the politics of the rehabilitation process after Hurricane Beryl, one gets a sense, or one is likely to get a sense, that is heavy politicking in the process. It's an opportunity to let the people see how much we love them. And we have to be telling them every day, we're building back better. We're building back better. We build it like you've never seen. Because now we get an opportunity to rehabilitate as we want. Not necessarily how you would like it to be. But in the same way, the absence of any real consultative democracy can be held responsible for the nonsense that takes place on the tarmac in terms of schools being infested with fleas and whatever else. We won't get into the way the animals were treated. If only because there is no official policy. We have RSPCA and whatever else. But that doesn't matter. We tell the people, shoot them. Although we don't know any better. But the same way that we are concerned about our image. And we were concerned about our image when Anim Yusuf, speaking to Vincentians in the US, talked about the prices going up, and he mentioned chicken back. There was a flurry of comments, negative comments, from the government that they're trying to make us look bad in the international community. Well, if we know anything about the international community, the image of the way the dogs were treated is enough to have people who try to protect and assist animals from saying, don't go to that country, because that's how they treat them. Did we think of that? And did we think that the image will come out? I mean, come on, did we not think of that? And that's why we ask our listeners to continue to apply your critical thinking skills. Because here is a situation which, while it seemed all right to the perpetrators, there is a clientele that is concerned about the way people treat animals, regardless of how those animals behave. Because they believe that we should be more humane generally. And that the way we sometimes treat animals is a reflection of the way we treat each other as human beings. Think of it. But it is either we have a policy of being concerned about our image at home and abroad and operate in a manner that is consistent with that. We cannot be going left and right. Having said that we live in a country that blows hot, blow cold, blow hot again, doesn't mean that it is the right way to do things. But we can't pretend that we are concerned about our image at one stage and then not concerned about it at another stage, when we have created that situation ourselves. We have not taken the time to do what is required to have determined where was the best place to put these people, these school children anyhow. We were so anxious to show the world that we can go helter-skelter in a few months' time after being elected in 2001 to transform into universal secondary education and tell the nation, oh, others were trying to hold you back. What have we done, really? Have we evaluated that so-called education revolution? Instead of pontificating each time, and this is a new aspect of the education, and this is a new aspect, we're not evaluating. We're just ticking boxes in terms of statistics. So more people are writing the exams, and we're checking the percentages of passes. We're not checking the percentages of failures and where those people go. Where are those who failed? Where are those for whom fast tracking was not an option or should not have been an option in the education system? Where are they? Have we matched our crime statistics with our education reality? Have we really evaluated the impact of the quote-unquote education revolution on St. Vincent and the Grenadines? Compare it with the criminal statistics. Compare it with juvenile delinquency. Compare it with domestic violence. Come to terms with the fact that there are teachers that are afraid to go into classroom because of the students. And the capacity of students to engage them or to threaten them in a violent manner. Have we taken that on board? Governance should really involve all of us, not just a select few. But as you come towards our next elections, you recognize that people are beginning to open their eyes because they've been watching this transformation for the last 25 years, or 20 years, 20 plus. And it is beginning to weigh on them. And the best they can get is a promissory note that we have the best option for foreign assistance through Taiwan, because we say so. And that anybody who wants to go to anybody else for foreign assistance have to understand that they first have to pay back Taiwan. That's why we found ourselves in a very precarious situation with Venezuela and Guyana and the dispute. Because on the one hand, all those countries that are part of PetroCaribe and all of those that were part of ALBA have an implicit loyalty to Venezuela. All of them. And they see and know Guyana has always been seen as part of the Caribbean. And we have a loyalty to Guyana because they're also members of CARICOM. And they were founding members of CARIFTA. So in many respects, the challenge facing our Prime Minister as well as others, he could talk about CELAC as long as he wants. The major challenge confronting him is those torn loyalties. And that is the problem he and other Caribbean leaders that were in PetroCaribe and some were in both PetroCaribe and ALBA. They have a major problem confronting Maduro and saying anything different. So they have to walk that middle line to show they don't really have any loyalty outside of that. That's our reality, you know. And we have to understand that. So as we end today's program, we remind our women of what we said at the beginning. Do not give up the fight. Continue to remain loyal to your cause. Your fight for gender equity. Your fight for your integrity. Your fight for your dignity. Your fight for your worth. Your self-worth. Your role in ensuring that some semblance of a family exists through all our years of history remains an important one. Do not surrender yourself on the altar of political and economic expediency. Never do that. And always lead by example because you care. You don't make it up. You genuinely care. It is in your DNA. Stay up their women and their girls. Because the future of St. Vincent and the Grenadines depends on you as much as it has always done. Continue to strive after being the best that you can be. Happy International Women's Day to all of you. May God continue to richly bless you. Enough said. You've been listening to another edition of Nice Radio's Callaloo presentation, Just Another Look. Just Another Look is an innovative, exciting, albeit decidedly provocative and yes, controversial, certainly, socio-political analysis of issues of a local, regional, and international nature. It's heard on Nice Radio every Saturday at 6 p.m., repeated on Sundays at 9 p.m. You can also find us on Facebook and YouTube. I am, of course, Keith